Now, there's a monster in the room, but it's not some shadowy creature underneath your bed. It's actually in your hand quite often, your smartphone. It's on your desk, your laptop, your PC, your Mac. It's mounted on your wall, right? Your TV, glowing, pulsing, and instead of you watching it, is what you think you're doing, it's actually watching you. This isn't just about scrolling through apps or binge watching shows. It's not even about your data being collected, which we know happens. This monster that I'm talking about here is rewiring your brain, tweaking your thoughts, and nudging our behavior every single day. Now, something out of a sci-fi movie, I get it, right? But this is real. It's actually documented, filed, and approved by the U.S. government. Now, what am I talking about here? It's called U.S. Patent 6506148B2, and it's titled Nervous Systems Manipulation by Electromagnetic Fields from Monitors. Okay? From monitors. So I want to tear this open with you because this isn't just some jargon. It's the truth about what's happening to your mind when you stare at a screen. And I think this pushes us, each one of us, to the point where we need to stop for a second and pay attention to what's actually being said in an instant like this. So let's start with some of the basics of what I'm talking about. Now, why is this patent there? Why does it exist? And why should you even care about it? Okay. So back in 2001, scientists by the name of Hendrikus Luz filed a U.S. patent 6506148B2. And by 2003, it was actually approved and published for anyone to read. So it's not a secret. It's public record. And the document essentially describes a way to mess with your nervous system, the network of nerves and brain signals that control how you think, feel, and act. And it's using invisible electromagnetic fields, or what's called EMF, emitted by screens. We're talking TVs, computers, tablets, smartphones. So any screen that you would basically use on a day-to-day basis. And here's how it works in simple terms, okay? Screens can flicker images, adjusting their brightness at specific speeds, right? So you're talking, these things are measured in hertz. So the flickers between 0.1 and 15 hertz essentially match the natural brain rhythms of your brain. So our brains operate on waves, theta waves, like for instance for sleeping, alpha waves for when you're relaxed, delta waves when you're in a deep sleep. So by pulsing these EMFs at the same frequencies as your brain, these screens can influence how your brain actually behaves because it can't tell the difference between something that's genuinely organic to itself or not because of this. And this particular patent that I shared with you lists some pretty creepy effects. And you can read it for yourself. I'll put a link to it down below so you can read it. It says things like drowsiness. So when you feel zoned out after scrolling too long, euphoria, that weird calm you get from endless TikTok videos, disorientation. Now, even nausea or emotional numbing where you feel less connected to your own feelings. And here's the wild part about all this, okay? You don't even need to be staring directly at a screen with this technology. Now, hear me closely. You don't have to be looking at a screen for this to work on you. They say just having it in your peripheral vision, say, for instance, your phone on the table while you eat, these pulses are being let out, and they're hitting your brain, and the device doesn't even need your permission to mess with you. It just needs you nearby. So do you ever wonder why you feel drained after an hour on your phone? And even if you're just watching cat videos, right? The patent might be the answer, might be part of that answer of why you're feeling that way. And this tech didn't just pop up randomly in Silicon Valley with the latest iPhone. This stuff actually roots all the way back to some dark corners of history. We're talking the 1950s, 1960s. CIA ran a couple different secret programs. One of the more known ones is MKUltra. And it's declassified fact, right? MKUltra was about controlling the human mind. You think about things like LSD, hypnosis, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation. All of those things were done to see how far they could push human behavior. And the goal was to break people down and reprogram how they think, act, and respond. So when drugs and torture stopped giving them the precision they were looking for, they turned to something a little more subtle, which was electromagnetic fields. So by the 1980s, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, who essentially is the Pentagon's wizard, who gave us the internet and GPS, they started experimenting with EMFs. And they explored things like synthetic telepathy, where machines could read or influence thoughts, and mind-machine interfaces, where tech connects directly with your brain. And the mission was non-kinetic warfare, which is a fancy term for saying winning battles without firing a shot. So instead of firing bullets, they were using invisible signals to shape behavior. And then when you fast forward to 2025 and that tech isn't locked in a military lab anymore, you realize that it's actually embedded in the screens that you're using every single day. Everyday Americans like you and I, and people from all over the world. So we're not talking about some future dystopia. This is happening right now in your daily life. And I'll break it down for you with some examples. We touched on some of these, but let me dive in just a little bit deeper to give you that understanding. So let's talk about TikTok, okay? It's not just addictive because of funny videos. The app actually uses rapid-fire visuals that flicker at specific frequencies, often mimicking the brain's theta waves, those sleepy, suggestible states. So it's like a lullaby for your subconscious, making you scroll longer, question less. YouTube, okay? You ever notice how the autoplay seems to know exactly what you'll be hooked on? And the algorithms are basically analyzing your facial expressions through your webcam, your clicking patterns, and they're gauging your moods. And they're serving not just as a way to entertain you with videos, they're steering your emotions and nudging you towards things like anger, calm, right? Aggravated, etc. Netflix actually even has a patent, guys, that they've optimized for binge watching. So tweaking their shows to keep you passive and glued to the couch. So it's not about just keeping you entertained, it's about keeping you docile. And it goes well beyond the entertainment aspect of this. We can talk about schools and the education system. We know, obviously, the General Board of Education being handled by the Rockefellers and initiated and taken over to indoctrinate, not educate, way back from the early 1900s. We see the way that that's happening with the way kids are learning about all this gender, dysphoria, all this weird garbage that they're learning on a consistent basis, this woke mind ideology that's being pumped and pushed upon our children. You think about hospitals, you think about the medical industry, how they're pushing vaccines and all the things that they have to try to push us towards things that are not real. I just heard a story about a doctor in Michigan who had been pushing hundreds of patients and misdiagnosing them on purpose with cancer just to get them into chemotherapy for the profitability of it. We can talk about workplaces. Blue light screens suppressing melatonin, the hormone that helps you to sleep and to relax, keeping you alert, but worn down at the same time, more likely to just go along with the grind, right? Sheeple. You think about politically, election campaign ads, debate soundtracks, candidates' videos, utilizing all these subtle pulses and visuals to sway your subconscious. And that gut feeling that you have about a politician may not even be yours. So your screen isn't just selling you stuff any further, it's installing habits, emotions, and even beliefs. So this is where it kind of shifts and gets a little scarier. Now, I will tell you, I'll preface it by saying we're going to get to the light, but we have to dig down and know the truth first, because it'll set you free. So the patent that we're talking about here gives us a method, but artificial intelligence is the one that potentially could be pulling the strings on something like this now. And I want you to think about how AI works today, because it's growing and it's rapidly taking over. So it's no longer just picking, ads or videos, it's studying you. Your phone camera tracks your eye movements, your smartwatch monitors your heart rate, keyboard logs how fast you type or pause. These systems are basically biohacking you. They're getting your biofeedback. And they're collecting data about your body and your emotions to know when you're stressed, you're tired, you're angry, and even when you're vulnerable. So when you're in those states, you're easy to influence. And AI can tweak the content that you see. So maybe a video to calm you down or an ad to push your buttons, right? Delivered with these EMF pulses to make your brain more receptive. It's essentially a DJ spinning a track for your nervous system, if you want to call it that. Now, the worst part is these AI systems are learning and evolving faster than we as humans can keep up with them, and they're built to optimize engagement, but now they're optimizing us, and we don't really know where they're headed with this. We don't. So if we take a step further, I'm going to drop a name on you that you probably haven't heard too much of. His name is Charles Lieber. This guy's the godfather of nanotechnology. He was a Harvard nanotech pioneer working on project funded by DARPA, many, many projects. And before 2020, when he was arrested for, basically colluding with the CCP's Thousand Talents program, sharing information, Lieber actually developed something pretty wild. It's called injectable nanowires. Tiny as hair, and basically it can be injected through syringes like vaccines, and it can integrate with your neurons, your brain cells, and respond to EMF signals outside the body, so Wi-Fi signals. That's where some people developed the whole concept of 5G, being able to control certain things after people were getting the shots. I'm neither here nor there on that. I'm just giving you the facts. You can go look up Charles Lieber, and all of his patents are available publicly. And I highly advise you to do that. But imagine this for a second. Screen sends out a pulse, and these nanowires embedded into your body pick it up. They could, in theory, influence your nervous system or even send data back to the system about how you're reacting. This is called a brain-machine interface, or BCI, brain-computer interfacing. And it's not science fiction, guys. Again, these patents are public. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's got nanowires inside of them, but the fact that this tech exists raises a question. That if these screens are already messing with your brain, what happens when they can talk to you directly from it? So this is a new kind of control. And it's definitely been upgraded. And I think of Sigmund Freud, right? The father of psychoanalysis, who showed that most of our decisions come from the unconscious mind, the part that we don't control. His nephew, Edward Bernays, took the idea and turned it into modern propaganda. He's the godfather of propaganda. In the 1920s, actually, Bernays convinced women that they could smoke by branding cigarettes as torches of freedom, right? Think about the Statue of Liberty. And he shaped public opinion about that. But he also did that for wars, corporations using symbols, fear, repetition. So he made these things household, commonplace. And now if you imagine someone like the skill set of a Bernays with today's tools, AI that generates these hyper-personalized pieces of content in seconds, real-time data on your heart rate, eye movements, your emotions, these EMF pulses are sent out to make your brain more open to suggestion. And this isn't just about selling you some products anymore, okay? It's about really reprogramming how you think, how you feel, how you act. And it's doing this on a global scale. And if you still think that that's just a theory, then let's talk about the Havana syndrome. I mean, it's as close back as 2016, I believe. U.S. diplomats in Cuba and other countries reported dizziness, headaches, memory loss, and a strange pressure in their heads. And after years of investigation, the U.S. government quietly admitted that they were likely caused by directed pulsed energy devices, EMFs. And these EMF-based devices are weapons that can target people. They can do so through walls, leaving no physical trace of evidence. And if this tech is being used on diplomats, I want you to imagine what's stopping it from being used in other ways. Okay? Your home Wi-Fi system, your workplace, and of course, your phone. So this is real-world proof that EMF neuroweapons exist and they are active. And you don't have to just take, my word for it, like LeVar Burton said, from Reading Rainbow. It's like, we're talking about high-level experts. Dr. James Giordano, for instance, he's a neuroscientist, DARPA advisor, and he's been really blunt about what he stated on this publicly. Actually, you can go and watch almost any of his lectures on neuroscience on YouTube, and they are absolutely fascinating but terrifying at the same time. He quoted this, and I quote from James Giordano. He says, "The brain is the 21st century battlefield." He said, "We can assess, access, and affect it both individual and at population levels." And Giordano talks about neurocognitive warfare, right? Using tech to shape behavior, emotions, thoughts. This includes EMF-based tools, synthetic telepathy, and behavioral manipulation. So these aren't ideas for the future, that are coming. They're funded, they're tested, and they're actually in use today. And so when a DARPA expert like this says your brain is a battlefield, you better stop and pay attention for a moment. Now, if you remember George Orwell, who wrote the book 1984, he wrote that to warn us about a world of constant surveillance and control. He gave us Big Brother and the telescreen, a device that watched you and fed you propaganda. But today's telescreen, you bought it. You charge it. You carry it everywhere. You stare at it for hours. And studies say that, I think the average person watches their phone screen for about 7 hours per day. And this phone is tracking everything. It knows when you blink, how fast you scroll, when you pause. It adjusts what you see to keep you hooked. Passive, predictable. And Orwell's telescreen was forced on people. As opposed to this screen, we invited it in. And it's smarter than anything we could have ever imagined. So as I mentioned to you at the beginning, we have to dive down dark to know the truth, but there is a ray of sunshine cracking through, and this is where we can fight back, because the monster's real, guys. Look, there's not any lie to that, but you're not helpless. And I believe this is what we can do as steps to fight back against this. First and foremost, we got to know the truth. I would advise everyone to go down in the link and look up U.S. Patent 6506148B2. It's online. It's free to read. Understand what's at stake. Spread the word. Talk about this to other people. Now, the new age of things is that it's faux pas to talk about stuff like this because it sounds so conspiratorial, so far from reality. Yeah, the reality that they want you to live in. But you have to break that mold. You have to get outside the matrix and break it. That's the only way that we can fight back, because the more that we stay silent, the more that is our compliance, and they continue to press their agendas forward. So we got to spread the word. Bring it up in school board meetings, community meetings, talk about it with friends. Protect your mind. Cut screen time down, right? Try a digital detox for a day or two. Spend some time in nature, away from devices. Meditate, journal, reconnect with your own thoughts. And you got to build alternative outlets. I think supporting decentralized platforms like open source apps and free speech networks that aren't tied to big tech algorithms are really important. We got to create, share human-driven content, right? Rather than allowing AI to take over the game. And most importantly, it is in teaching the next generation. We got to show kids how to question what they see on screens, man. We got to teach them how to think critically before algorithms do it for them. Because this monster that we're talking about really thrives in the darkness. And we got to shine a light. And the only way we do that is by talking about it, questioning it, and resisting it. So now that I'm sharing this with you, you're awake. And that's their biggest fear. They called it entertainment. It's always been about control. And you have always been the target. But now that you see it, and seeing it is the first step to fighting back, you got to do something about it.